As both a leader and as a mother, you can't get much worse than Malory Archer. Nobody wants to be on the receiving end of a bitter insult from a half-drunk superior, and definitely not from your only parent. And that's why we love her. Malory was one of the most memorable of the many memorable characters on Archer, helping define its distinctive brand of sharp, quick wit, and why her character's absence in the series after Jessica Walters' passing in 2021 left a hole in the show for the last 2 seasons that could never really be filled. This video is going to go over Malory as a character and how she works so well for the narrative.
I'll blow it out your ass.
Let's do this. Alright internet, this is the 3rd time I have covered a mom from an animated comedy on this channel, but Malory is different. While Peggy and Linda, as well as their peers like Marge Simpson or Lois Family Guy, all have their own personas and quirks, they all fill a similar role within their shows, functioning as mothers and wives who are or aren't nurturing members of their families in some take on the American family and sitcom tropes. But that is not what we get from Malory. She isn't defined in a relationship to a husband, only marrying in season 4, and not in raising her son because he's an adult, and she didn't even care for him when he was a kid. That is part of the fun of Malory within the show. Archer was never designed to be a dissection of the American family or sitcom tropes in any of the way that those other shows are. It is a show parodying Bond and the Cold War era spy stories. Malory is more of a play on Q from the James Bond franchise and could have functioned in the series without the familial connection. But that relationship between Sterling and Malory adds so much depth to both characters than if they weren't related, and opened up so many doors to the story than if they weren't. We will, of course, get to their relationship, but before we do, I think it is worth taking a look at who Malory was as a character prior to becoming the head of the agency. Before founding the terribly aged ISIS, Malory was an agent for the real-life OSS, her recruitment putting an end to her aspirations to become an actress. This actually ties in thematically with season 7, where the agency sets up shop in Hollywood. In the 2-part finale of that season, Deadly Velvet, Malory poses as an executive producer.
I'm a flamboyant Hollywood producer.
On the film set that they are working on, linking her to early dreams of the entertainment industry. But aside from that, it's also a reminder of how she needs to be in control at all times, as evident throughout that whole season, with her acting in charge even though it was the biggest agency at the time. She has to be in control in the agency, and she has to fake control on the set. I gotta say, just as a sidebar, I love this season and what it was doing, because these ties to old Hollywood aesthetics works not only as a vehicle for their storytelling, they were really trying to shake things up at the time, but also it feeds into the show's anachronistic time period. I just had to throw that out there. Oddly enough, aside from the Hollywood aspirations, we don't get a ton more on Malory's life before the events of the show. You get tiny bits, like how she has a past with Len Trexler.
The Chianti was definitely flowing, among other things. Mother?
But not a ton more than that. No story about how she left the OSS to start ISIS, nothing. The flashbacks we do get with her tie into her relationship with Archer, so we should get into that now. I don't know if y'all have noticed this, and you didn't hear it from me, internet, but Malory Archer is a bit of a bad mom. You could see Malory working as a neglectful mother, too wrapped up in her career as a spy, and while that is true, she's also an abusive person. So many cutaways to a young Archer highlight how Malory is, at the least, emotionally and verbally abusive, if not downright physically so. It explains so much about how Sterling ended up how he did, with all of his issues being emotionally honest or vulnerable. He just struggles with that. And this is why. While many of his shitty actions do come from his extreme wealth and success, the lack of a supportive parental figure definitely messed Archer up. The closest thing he had to that in his life was his valet Woodhouse, who has literally been there with him since birth, but Archer still treats him like shit because Archer does not know how to connect positively with him, partially because he so often views him as the help, but also because Malory, his only real known parent, does not lead by example. Also, Malory was the kind of mother who bought affections, bringing gifts to a young Sterling who, at 5 years old, didn't even know who she was, to buy his love. This adds to Sterling's materialism and begins the cycle of highs and lows that carves the perfect path to the terrible man he becomes. The question becomes, why is Malory like this? And it is a question we never get a real answer to, at least not directly discussed, so now we have to take off our discussion hat and slip on our analysis hat. Metaphorically, of course, since I'm not actually wearing any hats here. Malory never wanted Sterling. I'm sure this is a shocking take. Seriously though, she left him to be raised by Woodhouse for 5 years while she focused on her career as a spy, running across the world, I assume assassinating political figures. Now, we don't really have a clear understanding of why Malory started the International Secret Intelligence Service, ISIS, though we can assume it was because of her controlling tendencies that we discussed when she was backseat running the Figgis agency in season 7, as well as wanting the more lavish, affluent lifestyle being a CEO would provide. But if we wanted to be generous, we could read her starting an agency and moving out of the field to a position behind the desk as trying to be around more for her son. If this were the case, it would say so much more about Malory that she still treated him the way she did from when he was a child all the way to adulthood. Being as degrading to her son as she is would make sense if a part of her deep down resented him. If you're thinking, why would she want to start an agency to be there for him if she felt that way? The answer is that her resenting him and his existence doesn't mean she doesn't love him. There are plenty of bad parents who mean well out in the real world who, despite loving their kids, can't help but make things bad for them. I personally think it would make a lot of sense if there was a sort of deep-seated resentment deep in Malory, manifesting not only in how she treats others, but is also an explanation for her clear drinking problem as well. And to be clear, we know she loves her son. Despite how she treats Sterling, Malory's love for her son does manifest in plenty of ways throughout the series. I think the most blatantly obvious is at the end of the two-parter I mentioned earlier, Deadly Velvet. Discussing this episode just keeps paying off. Both of Malory's reactions to Archer's seeming death in the final scene is that of shock and heartbreak. Any resentments aside, you can't look at that and not think she is legitimately broken by the sight of her son's body floating lifeless in a pool. Not to mention that anytime Sterling is on a mission and something goes wrong, like he's captured or in danger in a way that helping him would put the mission in danger, Malory will choose the path to save her son. Always. Whether the other people want to or not. Now, this is all just a theory, because I could not find any concrete proof, no dialogue of her saying she never wanted to have a kid, but there are a lot of seasons of the show, so I might have missed a pithy comment about any of that in my working on this video. If I did and you remember it, let me know, because I would rather know the truth. I know she talks about his existence complicating her life, but that doesn't necessarily mean she didn't want him. Just that he didn't make things easy. Becoming a parent at an inopportune time and not wanting to have one are different things. But whether I am missing a confirmation of this or not, I do think it is fairly easy of a take to have. That said, I think we can move past this point. I don't think there's anything more to say. I don't know if this gag... Real vintage hat, by the way. One of the fun things about the relationship between Malory and Sterling is that it shares a lot of traits with how mother and child are depicted in other shows where the child is still a kid. As we get older, we no longer have our parents telling us what to do. We can still go to them for advice. I know I still get that from my parents, but it is advice and not orders. Most well-rounded adults stop trying to boss their kids around and accept that as adults they are more like peers now. That is not the case with the Archer family because Sterling works for his mother. Malory has a more direct say in her son's professional life because of that, and that in turn feeds into her controlling tendencies in his personal life as well. Archer has a rebellious, you can't tell me what to do energy that you see manifest in characters like Bart Simpson or Louise Belcher, exacerbated by the fact that he is a skilled adult with his own resources and weapons and a drinking problem. I just find it really interesting that While these characters aren't built to be a commentary on families and sitcom tropes like I mentioned, there is still this interesting hierarchy that is formed between the two characters. I also think it's interesting that Malory tries to exert a similar amount of control on her other employees and uses the same tactics on them. Those tactics being verbal abuse and manipulation. She will say whatever she needs to reach her goals, whether that goal is in relation to getting the job done for her agency or to feed her own ego. Seriously, do you remember when she called a fake bomb threat on an airship just so that she could go on its inaugural trip? All because her friend Trudy was gloating over getting tickets. This is sociopath behavior? This is probably a good point to remind people that discussing the negative traits of a character does not mean you hate them. You can absolutely, and my opinion should, be aware of the negative traits in characters you enjoy watching. I'm in the age group where in the 2000s there was a lot of reverence for characters who were bad people, but funny. Characters like Archer, or Barney Stinson for a live action example, who were funny, quick-witted, and full of catchphrasey goodness, but also people who did plenty of shitty things. I knew people who would talk in the same mean-spirited, put-downy ways as the characters on this show do, thinking if it was funny in entertainment, it is funny in real life. I've been in friendships where we could rib each other plenty with the knowledge that we don't mean any harm by it. But as I've gotten older, I've become more and more of the mind that we can leave that to our entertainment. But on the other hand, I gotta mention that it is also fine to enjoy characters who are bad people. I and so many other people on the internet have talked about the decline of media literacy in this regard, but every time I make a video about a character from a show, there will be comments equating bad actions as an indictment on the character, as if we can't enjoy them because of it. If you don't enjoy a character who doesn't align with you morally, that is fine, but it is not a universal truth. All this talk of negative traits makes me feel like we should balance things out and go over some of Malory Archer's positive traits. I think it's pretty cool, especially as an older woman, that she's still fun. In all honesty, I don't really think anything about Malory would be described as positive. Her likability comes from how entertaining she is, and that is thanks to the vocal performance from Jessica Walter, who kept the mean-spirited energy of Malory from her feeling grating or repetitive. It makes sense that she would be so good in the role, as they were looking for an actress who could do for Malory what she had done for Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development, a character that influenced the development of Malory. And who better to do that than the exact same actor? And she was able to make both characters feel really different. Jessica's performance was so pivotal to what made Malory work. I'm sure that is why they never tried to recast the role after her passing, along with honoring her work as Malory. Work that was so integral to the show that you can feel the difference in the series in the episodes that have come out after the character has been retired. Plenty of people have said that they couldn't watch the show after because it just didn't feel the same anymore. Even fans who kept up with the show or eventually caught back up to it like I did a few years back and enjoyed the later episodes for what they were, will admit it just wasn't the same. I think that highlights above all else the value of Malory as a character more than anything else I have said so far in this video, which is why I saved it to the end. And here we are, nearly 2 years after my first Archer video becoming my most popular release, I have finally done a follow-up. Took some time, but with my covering of Cartoon Moms from earlier this year, I finally felt like I had something that didn't feel like a cheap attempt to cash in on that success, so hopefully this one doesn't flop. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, maybe share this video with someone who you think would enjoy it, and until next time, have a good one.